Welcome to Education in Focus. I'm your host, Eliana Kernodle. Liam Morrison, who wore a shirt to his Massachusetts middle school that said there are only two genders, is asking the Supreme Court to take up his case, alleging the school is violating his First Amendment rights by preventing him from wearing it. Joining me to dig into this is Chalkboard News editor Brendan Clary. Brendan, tell us about this case.
Yeah, Eliana. So this is an interesting case, and we've written about it before at Chalkboard a couple of times. And essentially, the background is Liam Morrison, middle school student at Middleborough Public Schools in Massachusetts. He wore a shirt to school that said there are only two genders. And then the principal came in and said, you have to take this off. And he said, no, I don't want to. And then he was sent home from school that day. And then he came back and he wore a different shirt that said there are censored genders, had like a piece of tape over it. And it said there were censored genders. And they made him take that off too. And then he said like, hey, I want to be able to wear this shirt. The school said no. Then with the help of some conservative like legal firms, they filed a lawsuit. Liam Morrison, his family, and these firms, they filed a lawsuit against the school district. And they said, Morrison should be able to wear this shirt. The district court said, no, the school can make you take it off. And then a court of appeals, the First Circuit Court of Appeals, agreed with the district court and said that the school has the ability to take it off. And I think that, and I'm going to get to why, I think that that's a very interesting question about, that's a very interesting, insightful center of this case, right? Is basically there are two schools of opinion here, and why Liam Morrison is asking the Supreme Court to review this is because the school maintains that he's not allowed to wear this shirt that says there are only two genders because it is like hateful and homophobic to students at the school who are sexual minority, LGBTQ plus, and basically that have this idea of gender expansive, right? That students can be like gender fluid or have different kinds of identities that do not fit in the binary. And I think that that's something that we've seen a lot from different school districts that are talking about that sort of inclusivity about different genders. And there's been, a lot of talk in recent years about content moderation, book removals, book bans. You can call it what you like. I think some are more appropriate than others there to describe what's happening. But basically challenges from parents saying, I don't want this text in my children's library at school. We need to remove it. And then others saying, but this affirms the identities of LGBTQ plus youth. This affirms, the real life experience that they're having. We cannot take that away. And so this, I think, more than a lot of other cases, sort of typifies or gets to the heart of the different kinds of issues that are facing school districts throughout the nation today. Because we're, on the one hand, you're balancing, these political views and messaging from a conservative approach. And then on the more liberal side, you have school districts saying we have a government mandate to protect all students and to prevent them from being attacked by what they see as a threat to their very identity. And so that's what got the district court said why they sided with the school. And then the First Circuit Court of Appeals, they also affirmed that. And they basically said that students have the right to be free from these like psychological attacks, from being told that their identity is in question, and that's the effect that a shirt that says there are only two genders would have on them. And so I think that's the very interesting issue at the crux of this case, right? And that's what's going to the Supreme Court is this question, and I'll read this. So in a Supreme Court petition, if you're asking the Supreme Court, you have to state your case to the court in the form of a question, like here's what you have to answer. And the question that Morrison and his attorneys ask is whether school officials may presume substantial disruption or violation of the rights of others from a student's silent, passive, and untargeted ideological speech simply because that speech relates to matters of personal identity, even when the speech responds to the school's opposing views, actions, or policies. And so another facet of this is that Morrison contends that the school was not neutral in this kind of diversity point of view, and that they were allowing students to wear pride gear, have rainbow different things, and basically was talking about some of the stuff even in the curriculum about sexual minority youth and affirming them, and that the shirt was a reaction to that. And so then another thing from the petition to the Supreme Court basically said that the Court of Appeals took their, quote, remarkable position that a school may flood its halls with its views on a matter of public concern, hear gender identity, and encourage students to join in, then bar students from responding with different views. So this is a very interesting sort of breakdown of like what they're alleging the school is doing, and saying that, it's okay. Like, here are our thoughts on gender identity. And then on the other side, like, you can't weigh in on it, at school. You can't have a shirt that says something different than what we're saying. And so that's the argument that they're asking the Supreme Court to take up and to look at and say, is that right or wrong? Can the school do that? And I think in the larger context, right, of these sorts of culturally divisive issues, and listeners might remember we talked about the cost of conflict report, where researchers talked to superintendents and they tried to ascertain like how much is it costing schools to talk about these things in terms of staff and in terms of a lot of different things. And I think that kind of goes hand in hand with this. And in fact, I filed a public records request, and I found out that the superintendent of Middleborough Public Schools, Carolyn Lyons, she talked with those researchers. So she filled out a survey, and then she had a follow-up interview. And so they interviewed 12 of the 40 plus superintendents that took the survey to try to get more of their insights. And essentially that was a dominant theme in the report, is that you have like this idea from superintendents that they should be trying to minimize the capacity of what they call, culturally divisive, of like conflict entrepreneurs to speak out on these culturally divisive topics. And so I think that tracks, in that broad sense, like this sort of typifies, here's what superintendents are experiencing. And it sort of pits, these parents and sometimes families, or even in this case, students who have maybe a more conservative or like, even an opposing ideological perspective. And they're saying, no, we need to like try to tamp that down and not respond in a way that gives you anything, because we're trying to protect other students. We have sort of an entrenched position on what this means, or we have even a government mandate. And so it is kind of, I think, showing like, here are the cross sections of these cultural divides in America. And I just think that it's going to be very important to watch and follow, and we'll keep doing that at Chalkboard.
Well, thank you, Brendan, for your insights on this story. Listeners, as you said, can keep up with this story and more at chalkboardnews.com.